It depresses me. Truly makes me sick to think about what makes these people tick. Selfishness, insecurity, ego. I mean, where on earth can someone like me go to get away from all this stroking? I fucking hate people. I'm not joking.
Do you like my hair? I did that 70s TikTok challenge. Just kidding. Now, we talked about misanthropy when I talked to Dr. Donald, and some of you had some questions about it. Is misanthropy a mental illness? Is there anything wrong with being a misanthrope? Misanthrope, the word, comes from misos, meaning hatred, not soup. I know it as soup, but it's actually a Greek word meaning hatred, and anthropy. So that means people. So a misanthrope is a person who hates people, according to the exact definition of the word. Now, you may know the word anthros from anthropology, the study of people. If you are a misanthropic anthropologist, I feel bad for you. What are you doing with your life? Now, if you had asked me last week if I were a misanthrope, I would laugh in your face. Ha ha, I am not a misanthrope. I love people. Since then, I have watched a number of mukbang ASMR videos on YouTube. And I can no longer say for certain that I'm not a misanthrope. What are people doing? I feel if Jesus hasn't come down to stop mukbang ASMR, that he's not coming. We should just put that whole mythology in a closed folder and put it next to Zeus and other legends, because there is nothing worse. There is nothing less godly than mukbang ASMR, but I digress. I don't even want to talk about it. Now, misanthropy now is not the same as misanthropy back in the day. Like, I get why people are misanthropes now. There are 7 billion of us. We're choking the planet. Climate scientists are coming out every single day and begging us to use less resources. And we kind of laugh in their face. We don't literally laugh in their face, but we basically laugh in their face because we don't listen to them. We haven't listened to them in years. They've been saying this for 20 years. We don't listen to them. Now, us choking the planet doesn't mean that we're bad people as individuals. We just use resources. So it's not even humans, the individual humans' fault that we're doing this. It's just a byproduct of us existing in such numbers. It is a really big increase. I looked at the numbers and it is like a 4-fold increase over a century ago. So I get the argument. Maybe there are a lot of us. Some people will say that we're an infestation. To this I say, roaches can infest a motel, but can they infest a roach motel? No. The motel, the roach motel, is already for the roaches. And that's how a lot of people look at this world, that this world was made for us. Therefore, we're not infesting it, we're just living on it. It's kind of hard to make that argument without reverting to religious texts. Objectively speaking, that argument is sort of arrogant. See, we humans believe we have a right to live on Earth, so we don't see ourselves as an infestation. It's really hard to look at a small child and say, oh my God, what a cute little pest. But some people do. Misanthropes do, and at least they're being honest about it. There is a group called the Voluntary Human Extinction Movement, and they basically believe that people should stop having children, that there's too many of us already, and that we are not helping anybody by adding to the problem. If you believe that people should stop having children, you might be in this camp and not even know it. Now, there is a group that takes it a little bit further, the Church of Euthanasia. It was big in the 90s. It was on Springer. It's not really around that much anymore. Their website is still active, but it's not being updated. So it's still there. You can go take a look at it. Basically, it believes that people should kill themselves and then eat other people.
First, let's meet the founders, Reverend Chris Corder, Pastor Kim, and Vermin X. Give me 4 things that you believe in. What are the basic tenets of your philosophy?
We're gonna get to the 4 pillars of the Church of Euthanasia. You already know what they are. They're suicide, abortion, cannibalism, and sodomy.
Wait a sec. Say that again. Suicide,
abortion, cannibalism, and sodomy. That's right. And we're going to explain every one of them in great detail.
This is a faith. This
is an organized religion.
And this has to do with environmentalism?
Yes, it does, and we're going to explain it in great detail.
This isn't recycling cans. You're talking about suicide.
Recycling humans. It's funny you should mention that.
Now, these guys are kind of funny, and I'm kind of glad they're not still around, because if they were, I would not be suggesting this group at all. I would not mention this group on the off chance that one of my viewers looks it up and then joins this group and not sure if it's a cult or not. So, I mean, yes, these people take it a little bit far, but we are choking the planet. So I get where they're coming from. I don't agree with it, but I get it. Now, the environmentalist trend is relatively new, although misanthropy is not. Now, back in the day, there were less people, so we were not destroying the environment. However, the people that were around were awful to each other. They were just awful to each other. They were abusive. They tortured each other. There wasn't even a word for domestic violence. The word for domestic violence is just none of your business. Children were beaten and neglected. Wives were basically property, except when it was their time of the month, when they were property over there. I understand why back in the day people were misanthropes, because everyone you knew potentially was awful. And if they weren't awful, there's a good chance they were being abused by someone who was. So I totally get why, for most of human history, there were misanthropes. Now, since then, technology has made life so much better. We don't need to force each other to work and to suffer just to get a calorie. Our lives are better, and that's why there are more of us. So, give and take. But I guess this is a worst case scenario for misanthropes. I think if misanthropes published a paper, it would be called, they're still here. Like, all of our good news would be their bad news, and all of their bad news would be our good news. Like, their paper would have reported the coronavirus like we would have reported a cure for cancer. On the front page of their paper, there was a misanthropic sailor kissing a woman in Times Square at the start of World War II. Do you think that when misanthropes read a terrible news story, they're upset about all the people who didn't die? I don't know. It's just a thought. But we talked about it with Dr. Donald. And he seemed to imply that misanthropy and depression were closely linked. And I get that. But I don't agree that misanthropy is depression. Now, of course, one will be depressed if they live amongst a species that they cannot stand, if they are, in fact, a thing that they hate the most, a person. So you may be depressed if you can't stand yourself, obviously, but I don't think that they should necessarily be considered the same thing. Like I said before, there are perfectly valid reasons why people might not like humanity. There just are. Is misanthropy antisocial? Not really, but kind of. Because look, if a person despises the race of humans for what we are doing to the animals, that doesn't mean they can't socialize with other individual humans. They might not have kids, but they can still enjoy their lives and enjoy hanging out with other people. It doesn't necessarily make them antisocial because they hold these beliefs. Now, some misanthropes actually do not like individual people. They think that humans are generally selfish and deceptive. I don't know where they got this idea. Just took it out of the clouds, apparently. These misanthropes might be antisocial, but I would also argue that they are more optimistic than most people because they actually have high expectations for people. They expect people to be honest. They expect people to be disciplined. Apparently, they haven't met very many people if they expect people to be honest and disciplined, but yet here we are. Are they the anti-misanthrope? Because they have such high expectations and such high standards for humanity because they know what the race might achieve if we put our minds to it and are constantly disappointed that we never, ever, ever put our minds to it? I don't know. Maybe they're just in the wrong town. Maybe they're just hanging out with the wrong crowd. I really couldn't tell you. Now, as a culture, as you saw with the Dr. Donald interview, people think of misanthropes as a little sick. Why would you hate people? Are you not yourself a person? But back in the day, misanthropes were more prized because they were thought to have more discipline. They were thought to have higher expectations and higher standards of their fellow man. Now, we don't live in that culture anymore. We live in an anything goes, no judgment culture. So a misanthrope who's looking down on people all the time, like, ugh, what are they doing over there? Ugh, why are they doing that when they could be doing so much better? That person is considered judgmental, and no one wants to be around that person. They're kind of a Debbie Downer. Whereas back in the day, that person might inspire others to do better. Personally, I love some misanthropes. David Goggins, for example. Do you know who David Goggins is? He's an ultra marathon runner. No days off, no excuses, almost dies when he finishes some of his races because they're like hundreds of miles. I don't know why he's doing this. But he is very hard on the human race.
Fuck people! One thing you have to learn early in life. I didn't learn this till later on. I don't give a motherfucker. You can't care what anybody thinks about you. If I care what people thought about me, you think I'd be yelling out here, doing a 105-pound ruck, talking shit? This is who I am. Find out who you are, whoever that may be. I don't give a fuck what you are. Find out who you are and own that motherfucker and tell people to go fuck themselves.
His standards are so high. His expectations are so high for himself. And he knows that people can do better. So the way he talks to people, his motivational speeches are somewhat abusive. Normal is inferior and what you are is superior. So technically, this would be a misanthropic attitude. But I don't see it that way. I personally see Goggins as very inspirational. I feel he is talking to himself. And I feel whenever humans philosophize or talk about psychology or psychiatry, we are kind of talking about ourselves as well. So that's interesting. How else can we relate if not through ourselves? So that's another topic for another day. Back to misanthropy as a sickness. I think it's pretty easy to disguise a mental illness with misanthropy. Because you can just say, oh, I hate the world and that's why I'm doing X, Y, and Z. That's why I'm being cruel. That's why I'm saying these horrible things. That's why I'm doing these horrible things, when really it is a you problem. So I don't want to confuse these people with legitimate misanthropes, because I believe the philosophy of misanthropy actually has some merit, whereas a lot of these antisocial people have a mental illness, and that's not really the same thing. Also, I don't see how people can hate humans if they haven't met very many humans. Like, if you stay in your room all the time and you don't really talk to anybody, how can you say that you hate them? You don't even know them. You can't learn about the human race from the news. You actually have to get out and talk to them, because the news makes its money off of sadness, off of heartache. If it bleeds, it leads. There are no uplifting news stories that have been nominated for Pulitzer Prizes this year. I checked. They're all stories about heartache and sadness. Tragedy. That's what's in the news. So it's really hard to form an opinion about the human race from your phone, or from your computer, or just staying in your room. You actually have to get out and talk to people. Okay, so on the flip side to that is, if you are in your room and you are on Instagram and all you see are food porn and booty pics, you might be like, ugh, these people. How am I from these people? On the flip side to that, if you are seeing food porn and booty pics, it's probably because you've been clicking on food porn and booty pics. So most of what you see in the news is a small fraction of people. Most cool people, you don't even know about them because they're busy doing their own thing with their hobbies. They're going to school, they got a job, they got a family. They're not really worried about Instagram. They're not really worried about Twitter like that. So I can definitely see why people who are online too much would have a negative view of humanity. Also, this is what I have suspected for a long time. I don't know if it's true. You let me know. That the zombie craze is a whole bunch of hidden misanthropy just bubbling below the surface. Like, everybody hates people so much that they secretly wish they would all die and that they could shoot them all in the head. It is kind of a messed up genre when you think about it. Like, this fantasy, this horror fantasy that the whole world, except for the people in your household, are going to die and then become ravaging, blood-sucking cannibals so that you can be the hero and kill them. How is that not misanthropic? Someone got to explain that to me. And I wonder, this is a different video entirely, but I wonder if we're just getting to this point because, one, there's a lot of people. Two, we're all online and we see how awful the people who are online are. And three, we've just been coming out of this long extended time of peace. And so we're kind of itching for something. I don't know. I'm reading this book called The Fourth Turning. We'll get to that later. but I'm reading this book called The Fourth Turning, and it basically says that history is cyclical, and that when we have a long period of peace like we have, we seek to destroy it so that we can have adventure and excitement and get rid of the old paradigms which don't suit a lot of people anymore. So that is legitimately another video. I do not have time for it right now. The initial question was, is this zombie craze all of us just hating people so badly and being unwilling to admit it even to ourselves? A few years ago, I was cleaning up and I was listening to Schopenhauer's Studies in Pessimism. Now, pessimism and misanthropy aren't exactly the same thing. Pessimism is more just a sour worldview, whereas misanthropy is blaming all of that on human flaws and the problems with humans specifically. But there's a massive overlap. So they're not exactly the same thing, but Studies in Pessimism is sort of like the misanthropic Bible. So I'm listening to Schopenhauer, and he's really making a lot of sense. He's like, humans are essentially flawed. I'm like, yeah, humans are flawed. He's like, the human condition is suffering. I'm like, yeah, Buddha said that. This guy gets it. This guy totally gets it. And I read somewhere, or I heard somewhere, I'm not exactly sure, but I heard somewhere that a writer's best friend may not even be born yet. So Schopenhauer's best friend may not have been born for 200 years after he died. And so I'm thinking, wait a minute, am I Schopenhauer's best friend? Because this man is making a lot of sense. But then we got to the part on women.
Woman is not meant to undergo great labor, whether of the mind or of the body. She pays the debt of life not by what she does, but by what she suffers, by the pains of childbearing and the care for the child, and by submission to her husband, to whom she should be a patient and cheering companion. The keenest sorrows and joys are not for her, nor is she called upon to display a great deal of strength.
I am absolutely not Schopenhauer's best friend. Calls us frivolous, says the most important part of a woman is who she marries. I'm like, Schopenhauer, after all we've been through together, this is how you do me. I feel betrayed. I felt betrayed at that moment. So basically, that was the end of that book for me. And I've thought about it and I was like, he's not correct. He was just sort of repeating the popular thoughts of his day. Also, the general pessimistic worldview no longer applies. Maybe it applied when he was talking about it in the early 1800s, but it no longer applies now. And I think I had kind of gotten caught up in his word salad. I'm glad he said such terrible things about women. I don't want to go down that path, the pessimism path. Okay, later on in life, Schopenhauer did meet a woman, a young girl who was a painter, and she impressed him so that he rethought his views on women, but even so, the spell was broken. Now, I know I said a lot of great things about misanthropy, but I myself am not a misanthrope, even though we are choking the planet, because I can't hate people. Think of what people have done. Just think of what people have done. Art, the Sistine Chapel. Mathematics, the study of black holes. Dim sum. Yes, you can say that a sunset is more beautiful than all of the art that man has ever made. And you can say that mathematics were discovered and not invented. However, there's no dim sum tree. You don't get dim sum without people. All I'm saying is this. I get misanthropy. I totally get it. It is hard to watch the greatest invention man has ever made, the internet. It is hard to watch that used for mukbang ASMR and twerk vids. It's really hard to see that. Wow, I just sort of talked myself into being a misanthrope right there. No, because we do improve and life is much better now than it used to be. Like 50 years ago, people used to hate blacks, they used to hate gays, and through consistent effort, we have turned that around for the most part. Not completely, but for the most part. And not all that effort was really positive. But you know what? We turned it around. We turned it around. So I'm going to force that one into the win column. So now I have a question. Not being a misanthrope, I want to hear from you misanthropes out there. Do you hate humanity or do you hate humans? Also, when you tell people that you hate either humanity or humans, how do they react? Are they accepting? Are they like, on the down low, we hate humans too? Or are they like, how can you hate humans? What a terrible thing to say. I'm just curious. I kind of want to know how you go through life. Oh, yes. And I will be giving this shirt away to my sister because I actually like people and I am not a misanthrope, and she totally is, for good reason. Subscribe.